What are the biggest mistakes 5e players and GMs make in Pathfinder? What are they all about? And can you fix them, or are you doomed to ruin PF2E with your shenanigans? This is the Dominomicon, authored and hosted by me, Dominic. The Dominomicon is dedicated to all nerdy things, with my current obsession being the TTRPG Pathfinder 2nd edition. This video chapter is, obviously, a list of the biggest mistakes Dungeons & Dragons 5th edition players and GMs make when running PF2E. I have scoured the interwebs to find these mistakes, and this list has what I believe are the biggest and most common ones. Hopefully this video chapter will help reduce those mistakes from happening so everyone can have a super happy fun time with PF2E like I do. This video assumes you know the basics of PF2E, and if you don't, I have 2 videos for you linked in the description. Watch them and then come back. Okay. This list isn't in any order except for the first part being the most important mistake that I see, and some of these mistakes I'll mention will be quick and simple and others will be bigger and more complex. Of course, your mileage may vary if you decide to ignore my advice in this video here, and some of these mistakes might not even affect you. As ever, if you find this video helpful, please give it a like and consider subscribing. So, despite all the stuff I'm about to say, PF2E has a thing called the first rule. And that rule is, this game is yours. Ultimately, if you don't like something, you should change it, as you're all here to play the game and have fun.
Super happy fun time.
And this rule is so important to Paizo, the PF2E designers, that it's in PF2E's main rulebook, Player Call, right near the start. Clearly, it's important to Paizo for you to have fun with the system and change the stuff you don't like.
Super happy fun time.
And with that said, before I jump into the list, I want to talk about what I call the prelude to mistakes in PF2E, as it's the biggest mistake 5e players and GMs make in this system. And that mistake is this. They alter the rules and even introduce homebrew stuff before they've even had a session. Okay, I know what I just said, and I know how contrary it seems to the first rule. Really, the idea here is that you should at least play the game a few times before you start revising the rules and adding in extra stuff. I get that you would probably think that some systems are universal across TTRPGs, and thus introducing homebrew or playing with the numbers is fine, and while this is partially true, PF2E has some extremely tight maths behind it, and even changing a value like AC or saving throw by 1 or 2 can really muck things up, which I'll get into more detail on shortly. And putting in your own homebrew, especially with the idea being that they worked fine in 5e, can be potentially disastrous. PF2E and 5e are not the same game in the same way that chess and checkers aren't, and they have to be respected in this way. That isn't to say that you can't revise any of the rules. Despite how vehemently the PF2E community defends the rules, I don't think a single GM out there can say they run the game 100% rules as written. But those GMs have experience with the system and more than likely know what they're doing. PF2E should be treated exactly the same as if you were playing a new board game for the first time. You'd at least play a couple of games before changing a few rules you didn't like, right? Well, the same principle applies here. Once you've played in or ran at least a few sessions, you'll have more of an idea on how the maths works, and then you might be able to start playing with the systems to suit yourself or your group better. At that point, in my opinion, the first rule kicks in, and you can alter and play with the system as you wish. Okay, with the prelude to mistakes out of the way, onto the actual list. The top 10 mistakes 5e players and GMs make in PF2E. Number 1. Altering enemy stats because fights were unbalanced in 5e. And obviously this potential mistake is a GM one specifically, but I'd say it's the responsibility of everyone at the table to try and keep an eye out in case this does happen. I know that's easier said than done, especially as it's seen as kind of metagamey to look up enemy stats, but if you find your group really struggling, dying over and over despite you doing things like flanking and not just attacking constantly, there might be something wrong. PF2E is meant to be challenging, not nearly impossible. In PF2E, the encounter building rules are extremely well designed, and most of the time they work every time. Joking aside, if the encounter builder tells you that an encounter is going to be severe, then it probably is going to be, and if it tells you it's going to be extreme, there's pretty much a decent chance that there's a TPK around the corner. This means that altering enemy stats can potentially be extremely dangerous for your group. If a player catches a GM doing this when they're new to the system, they should really have a discussion with them, as experienced PF2E GMs will all say that it simply isn't a good idea to do this until you really know what you're doing. The biggest reason for this is the 4 degrees of success. Because you can get a crit by rolling 10 above the DC, and this includes AC and saving throws, etc., this means that if you alter an enemy's attack bonus or similar stats by 1 or 2, you're suddenly giving them a pretty large increase in their chance to crit. And crits in PF2E are doubled entirely, so the damage is possibly astronomical. Thus, it's highly recommended that new GMs leave the stats of the monsters that the party is facing well and truly alone until they really know what they're doing. And they absolutely should follow the encounter building rules to a T, at least initially. Okay, next up, number 2. Converting a 5e campaign and characters over rather than starting afresh. This is one of those things that some GMs and players have actually had some success with, but generally I do find that it causes more issues than if you were to just start over. Obviously, I completely empathize with people who want to convert the game over, as it could be a campaign that's gone on for years. And while I do have a possible solution to that, it does come with some issues. So I first advise that you really consider starting afresh. The reason for this is that most of the classes in 5e cannot simply be converted into PF2E because they work quite differently, and some are missing entirely. That's not to say that it's impossible, especially as PF2E has a ludicrous amount of character building options to the point where you could probably basically make anything from 5e and PF2E. It's just that it's a large task to do when you could just avoid it entirely. But this is one of those situations where you really have to weigh up the benefits versus the costs. If you do insist on moving your campaign and characters over, then I have a simple suggestion that should make this easier in the long run. Simply run a small campaign, maybe just 3 or 4 sessions long, so you understand how the system works. Maybe grab one of the Pathfinder Society adventures, such as Lions of Katapesh, which are smaller adventures that vary in length. Once you've done this, you'll have a pretty firm grasp on how the majority of the system works, and then if you wish to convert over your campaign and characters, it'll be a heck of a lot easier. There's nothing wrong with putting your old campaign on hold temporarily. I know this might upset some players, and some players also don't want to make new characters, but honestly, making characters in PF2E can be stupid fun, so some of the group will actually end up having a great time doing this, especially if you do it together in like a session 0 for PF2E. Alright, next on the list, number 3. Altering the action economy. While this isn't a particularly overly common issue, it is something that I've seen some 5e players and GMs do to the PF2E game. They start making decisions like movement doesn't cost an action, nor does standing up, or interacting to draw a weapon, etc. And while I understand why they do this, considering movement is effectively free in 5e and drawing weapons is also sort of free in 5e, whereas it isn't here, playing with the action economy in this way effectively wipes out a lot of the strategy that goes into the game itself. Part of the reason that PF2E seems tactical when it comes to combat is because you can utilize your actions cleverly to remove actions from your enemies. This is especially useful when there are fewer enemies than there are party members, such as against bosses. And by the way, most GMs allow players to draw a weapon for free at the start of a fight, so long as they weren't ambushed, and vice versa for enemies. But deciding that movement doesn't cost an action can massively disrupt the carefully created balance that goes into the action economy. And this 3-action economy is meant to make you feel as though you never have enough actions to do the things you want to do, and changing that feeling really can mess with the system. And while I get that a lot of 5e players really hate that feeling, it ultimately streamlines combat in a lot of ways and opens it up to clever tactical maneuvers like forcing enemies to close the gap on you, costing them extra actions. It's just one of those things that you've got to get used to, and I really do not recommend altering the action economy, as I personally think it works great once you get used to it. Next one on the list is number 4. Assuming the rules work in the same way. PF2E has Concentrate, PF2E has Sneak Attack, PF2E has 6 attributes or ability scores. These things all work somewhat differently to how they work in 5e. First of all, concentration does not exist in PF2e. There is the concentrate trait, but that simply means that an ability or spell needs the character to concentrate in able to do it, and some abilities such as rage remove this capability. Spells are not disabled by doing a certain amount of damage in this system, unless you get killed or whatever. Instead, some spells just stay up for their duration, and others need to be sustained, which is a single action that you have to do every round. round. If you were to lose all of your actions while you're trying to sustain a spell, then it would finish. Sneak attack is able to be used more than once per turn in PF2E, and it can actually be used as many times as you can keep the enemy off guard and keep hitting. As for the attributes or ability scores, there are no ability score checks in PF2E. If your GM tells you to do an intelligence check, they are not running the game rules as written. Everything is done with skill checks here. My point here is that just because something has the same name or sounds alike, it doesn't mean that it works in a similar manner, and you really should double check before you assume things incorrectly. Again, PF2E is a different system to 5e and must be treated as such. Alright, now we're on to number 5, ignoring the multiple attack penalty, or MAP. By ignoring, I actually mean in two different ways. Some GMs simply tell you that the MAP doesn't apply in their games, and some players will simply keep attacking 3 times every round that they can. Both of these are probably not a good idea. Again, the game is very well balanced and is designed quite tightly around certain aspects. The reason the multiple attack penalty exists, from what we know anyway, is because the PF2E designers didn't want people to simply just keep attacking every single round and not do anything interesting. They wanted tactics and strategy to matter, and they wanted each fight to feel different and to feel like you can do a lot more than simply just attack over and over. So standing there and attacking over and over makes for a much less interesting game. Of course, ignoring the multiple attack penalty and pretending it doesn't exist is going to be pretty bad for balance across the board, especially as there generally tends to be more enemies than there are party members, so they're going to get a lot more attacks than you, and you're going to die very quickly with 3 actions each. Please, GMs, don't do this. And attacking over and over is just generally not a great idea when there's lots of other things you can do, such as demoralizing an enemy, or bon moting an enemy, or taking cover, or moving somewhere more advantageous, or aiding an ally, etc. This is one of those things that most new PF2E players grow out of eventually, but it's extremely common early on. Okay, next one on the list is number 6. Doing opposed rolls. Technically, I guess initiative checks are classed as opposing rolls, in a way. But aside from that, there are no opposed rolls in PF2E, and the game is not balanced around them happening at all. Quite simply, the person performing the action is the only one that's supposed to roll a check. The other person uses the relevant stat for the action being taken against them and adds 10 to it, and that becomes the DC. It's really that straightforward. A quick example is someone lying to you. They roll a deception check against your perception DC, which is your perception plus 10. If they meet or beat the DC, you believe their lies. That's it. No opposed rolls. This way is quicker and simpler. Okay, it's time for number 7. Not utilizing your third action. This is another one of those things that newbies do in PF2E quite often. They basically forego their third action because they don't actually know what else to do with it, or assume there isn't anything they can do that's useful. This tends to be very common among spellcasters, as most spells cost 2 actions to cast, and if the player character is already in position, they don't really know what else to do with that third action. Of course, once they learn about all the actions they can use, some of which I've mentioned in this video chapter already, they always want to spend that third action doing something. Suffice to say, GMs, please suggest actions to your players if they don't know what to do with their third action. The sooner they understand that the third action can be used for interesting and useful stuff, the sooner they will start using it and having a lot more fun as a result of that. Super happy fun time. Okay, number 8. Ignoring and hand-waving rules that exist. The thing about PF2E is, there's pretty much a rule for everything. And I really mean everything. Of course, it's perfectly fine to handwave stuff, and if you don't actually know the rule, it's usually quicker in a session to either handwave it or just create a DC on the fly, etc., than it is to look up the rule and slow down everything. And once the session's over, you're probably better off looking up the rules so you know for next time. But the fact of the matter is, there's lots of subsystems and obscure rules that are already created for PF2E. And of course, because these systems already exist, it'll be balanced better than something you can come up with on the fly. The point here is that you don't need to handwave half as much as you think you do. Seriously, next time you're thinking that you're going to have to create a whole system for how a certain strange thing should work, such as breaking into a bank or flying an airship, just try to look up the rules first, because there's a good chance that PF2E has those already. Penultimate point, number 9. Not taking medicine, you naughty player characters. There are no short rests in PF2E, and medicine is actually useful both in and out out of combat, though the former is with a specific skill feat called Battle Medicine. Thus, it is imperative that someone in the party either picks up some repeatable healing magic such as Lay on Hands or Hymn of Healing, or they become trained in medicine and take a healer's toolkit. If you do not do this, there is no way to heal between fights, and I guarantee this will cause TPKs. For GMs listening, this needs to be enforced or your players are going to have an extremely bad time playing this system. There's way too many posts on the subreddit that I've seen of GMs just simply letting their player characters not be trained in medicine and have no way to heal in between fights. And for the players listening, just try to make sure one of your party members picks up medicine and a healer's toolkit, and that's it, you should be good. Right, last mistake that I see all too commonly in PF2E from 5e players and GMs. Number 10. Misattributing attributes, which attributes to less fun. Yes, I just wanted to say the word attributes many times. But actually, this is one of those things that does come up very commonly. It's pretty important in PF2E that you should have a +4 or 18 if you're using the old 5e ability score numbers in your primary attribute. While this isn't essential, it is very important. So if you're a cleric, you're going to want to get a +4 in your wisdom attribute at level 1. If you're a sorcerer, you want that to be +4 in charisma, and a wizard, +4 in intelligence, etc. And some of the other classes can be MAD or multiple ability dependent, though I guess it should be multiple attribute dependent now. A magus, for example, which is basically a sort of spell sword, uses strength or dexterity as their primary attribute. But even if they take strength as their primary attribute, they're going to want some dex for AC, and they're going to want some constitution so they can stay alive a little longer, and they're definitely going to want intelligence because when they're casting spells outside of a spell strike, which is an attack that automatically has the spell succeed so long as they hit an enemy, the spell DC is based off of intelligence. And there's going to be times when you want an illusion spell to succeed or you want to cast a spell at range, etc. Just make sure to speak to your GM when attributing your attributes for some of the more complicated classes. Classes such as the Barbarian and Rogue are probably a lot more simple, but still, it pays off to have a +4 in your primary attribute at level 1, regardless of your chosen class. Okay, that is the end of this list and the end of this video chapter. Hopefully, if you've watched all the way through, you will know the biggest pitfalls to avoid when running or playing PF2E as a new player or GM from 5e, and you will not be doomed to ruin it with your shenanigans. But now I will ask you, my beautiful, loyal viewer. Are there any common mistakes that you see 5e players making when they come over to PF2E that I haven't mentioned? Did you make any of these mistakes yourself? And what simple advice do you think you could give to new PF2E players if they're coming from 5th edition? Add a comment and I will do my best to reply to each and every one of you. And if you found this video useful or helpful or whatever, please consider liking and subscribing. There's plenty more to come from me. But that's the end of this video chapter. This is Dominic of the Dominomicon wishing you a fond farewell, and until next time, goodbye.
Super happy fun time.